put the other book aside and started to write this one. It was originally supposed to be called Diaper Dynasty. And then I was chatting to a friend of mine, and then she was asking me, what does Diaper Dynasty mean? What's the contents? And then I was like, maybe I should just call it How to Kill Children. And that's how HTKC came to be. So this is Vic Chege, author of How to Kill Children, and this is my story. So my name is Vic Chege, and I'm the author of How to Kill Children. Now, there's an additional line. It's not an instruction manual because the title is a bit strong, I would say. Yeah. So the book is sci-fi. It's African sci-fi and also suspense. So that's why there isn't any, brief summary on the back. On the back, it just says The Sons of No One, which is a line inside the book, which just ties into the whole suspense type from the title to the back to the contents. Yeah, that's why I went with sort of a minimalist, but not bio, a minimalist, bio for the book. Yeah. So this is actually my second book. The first one is not complete. The first one, I was in the process of writing it. It's called The Science of Noses. So I was in the process of writing it, and I was just getting stuck because it was sci-fi. And I just couldn't figure out, the character development, the characters I wanted, even the names of the people. After the name, The Science of Noses, I couldn't figure out much, but I was still writing it. So I came across a WhatsApp status from a friend of mine who's a publisher in South Africa. Her company is the company that published the book. They're called Masher. So they were having a competition where the winner would get subsidized rates for publishing. They had a benchmark where they said the minimum number of words is 10,000, maximum is this for the books that they wanted to publish. So I actually just put the other book aside and started to write this one. It was originally supposed to be called Diaper Dynasty. And then I was chatting to a friend of mine, and then she was asking me, what does Diaper Dynasty mean? What's the contents? And then I was like, maybe I should just call it How to Kill Children. And that's how HTKC came to be. So for that competition, I sent them my manuscript. And then I didn't hear back from them for a few weeks. So I was like, what's going on? Is my book not good enough? Is the manuscript not good enough? That kind of thing. But I also understand that business was closing because it was towards the end of the year, like they were closing out for the year. So I had to, that was last year actually. So the whole process of writing the book, this book took me about 3 weeks to write total, but the research for it has been going on about 7 years. Like, ask any of my friends, they'll tell you I've been wanting to write a book for the longest time. I just never pulled the trigger. And that was the motivation behind just starting. And because it was the second book that then became the first, now it's a preamble to The Science of Noses. It's a series. Yeah. I knew I wanted to do, I'm really into fiction writing, fiction books. I don't like biographies or autobiographies or certain kinds of types of books. So I've really always been into fiction. So of course, when I was writing mine, I decided it had to be fiction, but what kind of fiction? So I decided to go with sci-fi. Now, the reason I went with sci-fi is because when people think of like African sci-fi, more sometimes they sort of think it means something like witchcraft, like that's the line you have to take. So I wanted to like shed a new light on a different style of writing, but I also didn't want, you know, like Hollywood type powers, you know, like people who can control the weather, control lightning. I wanted the characters to have, I'd call them useless powers. So for instance, there's a lady whose only ability is she can tell when an egg is boiled, right? Like if she's boiling eggs, she can tell which one is ready just by looking at them. That's her only ability. There's nothing else she can do. And so because of that, her family ends up eating lots of eggs because she wants to use her abilities. And then there's a guy who he can tell, like he always looks at a door before it's knocked. If there's someone at the door, 1 second before he looks at it, he turns and sees, okay. Like every time he turns towards the door, somebody knocks on it. He has that ability. It's not very big or useful or, you know, but it's what I wanted to highlight. It's mostly, the reason I got stuck with writing the first book is because I needed to compile a list of these useless abilities. So none of them by there are in HTKC. In HTKC, which is a preamble, there's different kinds of abilities. Yeah, just the process is just to sort of try and figure out what would work for who, how much strength the ability should have, how strong they should be, or whether people with a weak ability can use it in a decisive way, that kind of thing. That's been a lot of the challenge and inspiration, is just challenging myself to think about these things in like, okay, the ideas sometimes they come while you're writing, sometimes you're chatting to someone about the book and you realize maybe they've had an experience that you think, that might be good. Like there was one time I was talking to someone and they told me that sometimes when they look at a clock, their mind tricks them such that it looks like the second hand goes back and then starts to tick. So that's the kind of thing I wanted to highlight, that, you know, it's not, oh, you know, let me call down the heavens and smite 50,000 people. Yeah, it was more intended to be powers that are personal. You know, you can use in the kitchen. They're not good for anything. You just have them. Yeah. In terms of like inspiration for writing, of course, when I first thought about to write about African sci-fi, I looked into some of the titles. One of them was, you know, the Children of Blood and Bone series by Temi Adeyemi. She's a Nigerian in the US, and she's written, I think I've read all her books. So the thing that didn't really connect with me is because in the afterword, there is a note about police brutality in the US, which is, it feels like a topic that's really far away. But some of the other books some of the other authors that have inspired me are, okay, so sometimes I go through a list of books based on their genre, yeah? So there was a time I was reading all about like metaphysics. So there's this author called Orson Scott Card. Man, I must have read all his book series, and like he has different series. He has different series. So some of them are about like space flight, some of them are about old times. So for all of them, it's fiction like I've never read it before. It just opens you up in crazy ways. Then one of my favorite books is called The Library at Mount Char. Yeah. So also that one, just reading about, first I read about the book, I read the book, and then I read back to the story of the author. So for instance, in The Library at Mount Shah, there was sort of like a device you could use, or a device you could use to travel back in time. And he says that in his original book, he had featured that device a lot of times, but then his wife read the book and she was like, it's a bit lazy to fix everything with time travel. Why don't you just write? So when I read the book, I think the time travel device is mentioned maybe twice, as opposed to the original one where it must have been mentioned a lot more. So that's the kind of thing I'm also looking to do. I don't want to solve everything, like any conflicts, with a reset button. So if someone's going through a hard time, there's no reset button in life. So I want to describe that hard time that they're having in full, knowing that it'll impact them in probably a grievous way, like it'll really hurt them. But you also can't keep running from pain. Just like you can't take back the good times and you can't take back the bad times. Your life is your life. You only get that one. So that's some of the things, some of the authors that try to do that try to get their characters to work through their issues. That's the kind of thing I'm into. To you, this book was co-written by coffee and quick and easy meals, you know, because you've got your other life, you've got other stuff you need to do. So, and the inspiration to write, it comes at you at the most inconvenient times, when you can't do anything about it. So you just need to, if you're feeling like the story you're writing is not as good, what you do is try to set a schedule where you write every day. Every day, work on one thing or another thing. It doesn't have to be, okay, now I'm at chapter 6, I will only focus on chapter 6. Maybe in chapter 4, there's something you can go back and add. That's what works for me. If the idea for something that comes later ahead in the book comes, that's what I'll follow. So in terms of publishing, I would say things like timelines are, because you're dealing with a lot of people, yeah? So if you get a good publisher, it really makes a lot of their work very easy. You just have to focus on the content, and then they focus on the editorial bit. You also need to find a good printer. Oh, I cannot emphasize. So I already had printed like 100 copies, and they didn't turn out the way I wanted. I really was not happy about that. But there was nothing I could do. I still have those 100 copies. I can't release a book that I'm not comfortable with, that even if it had just been one typo, I would not have released the book. Just because, first of all, this is your ambassador out there. And second, I'm not saying it has to be perfect, because you'll keep revising the book as you get feedback from your readers, yeah? But it has to at least have everything that you want to be in it, to be in it. That's the number one thing. There's so many things you have to think about. I'd recommend, if you're printing copies, do not dive straight into it. Do not say, okay, give me 100. Tell them to do a sample. Once they do the sample, once you approve, then they can do their 100 copies. That will save you so much time. I would say the sample, it shouldn't cost you more than, depending on the size of the book, it should be about maybe $5. So print a sample, confirm everything. With every correction I ever made to the book, I would have to read the book from beginning to end. Nobody should read your book more than you have. I can say that nobody has read this book more than I have. I read it for kicks, I read it to find mistakes, I read it when I'm bored, just to find things I can improve. And once you've finished writing, number one is revision, revision, revision. You need to go over every sentence, because it's all on you. And especially if it's your first book, yeah? any other publication you put out after that will be judged on the merit of the first one. They were like, if the audience is like, the first one, he just phoned it in. Yeah, I don't think you'll have much response if you ever put out something else. So the book itself is 700 bob. It's on a website called nuria.co.ke. That's where you can find a copy. It's also available on Amazon. It's a bit pricey on Amazon, it's $9. Or if you'd like a signed copy, you could hit my DM on any of my social media, which is Chege VIK, not Chege VIC. You can hit any of my social media and I would send you a signed copy. Yeah. My advice to anyone who's looking to write a book is start now. You should have started yesterday. Don't wait for Goldilocks conditions, for things to be right, for all your ideas to come together so that you can begin. You should already have started. And the reason I'm saying this is because it won't take you like sometimes even a year is too short a time. I know books that have been written in 7 years. I know books that have been written in 10 years, in 13 years, that kind of thing. So if you're waiting for every single idea you have to come together, you will never get started and you will never finish. Yeah? So just start now. And for the rest of it, solve the problems you have currently. So for instance, if the problem is writing, solve that problem before you start thinking of, the printer, the publisher. Just solve the problems for the stage you're at first. I'm not saying don't think ahead about it. I'm just saying if you get too bogged down in what's in the future, you'll forget what you're supposed to do right now. So what you should be doing right now is writing. Yeah. After this, find that folder on your laptop and write. Use a pen and paper if that's what you like. A typewriter, just write.